Rockfin.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you can catch me here Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. What's going on, guys? Let's go ahead and do the damn thing. I want to go ahead and give shout outs to people in the chat first. What's going on? Hannah G says, hi, Sabby. Hello. Greetings. Andrew says, Marianne Williamson for president. Shout out to Dabby Dabs. How's it going, Sabby fam? Don't forget to show the like button some love. That's right. Greetings to Joyce, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Angela, who's a Sabby member, says, greetings, Sabby and Sabby chat. Hashtag like button smash and no on the poll. Not even once. Guys, do me a favor. If you haven't done so, go ahead and answer that poll question. We will reveal the results at the end of the show. That is going to be very telling. I'm curious to see that response. Would you vote for Marianne Williamson if she were to change her views on foreign policy? If she changed her view on the Israel-Palestine issue, the two-state solution, which she mentioned to us on RBN, and if she changed her view on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which is to call for peace and to stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. Shout out to Lana, says, I'm never voting for a candidate unless they personally pay me and everyone else $1 million. Lana is not holding back. Shout out to Jacob, says, I'd settle for a commitment to a dirty break. Interesting. What's going on, Lorez? Hello, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Hello, Sabby. By hitting the like and watching the ads, I voted no. I don't trust her. What's going on, Mastermind, who's a Sabby member, says, hellos, fam. Shout out to, Eric, who's also a Sabby member, says, greeting all Friday friends. Shout out to Rodrigo, says, Marianne Williamson should be called out before she's allowed to steal $100 million from the working class. Rodrigo coming in with the punch. What's going on, Oz, says, impeach Biden, fire Pete now. I agree with you. I agree. Shout out to Stop Cop City, sends love. What's up? Greetings, Wary, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, everybody. Shout out to Silver Surfer, says, appreciate all your hard work, Sabby. Thank you so much. And thank you for being a member as well. Greetings, Randy, says, good evening, comrades. Shout out to Serena. Good evening, comrades. What's up, Terry Hinton, says, hello, Sabby in chat. Greetings, Eric, says, Biden was doing his USO show entertaining the Nazi troops in Ukraine. There you go. What's going on, Betsy, says, TGIF, Sabby, you are doing the damn thing and making it make sense. Thank you. What's up, Jordan says, it's kind of hard to take her seriously if she just wakes up and changes on those positions. That's a good point too, Jordan. What's up, Kaya? Hey, beautiful lady. Hello, Kaya, the pissed off Canadian. I love it. Greetings, Rick says, hey, y'all. Hey, Rick. Shout out to Fat Man TV. Doobie doo, love it. Greetings, Notori sends love. Shout out to RIP Shireen. Abu says nope. That poll will be interesting. Shout out to Roger Meadows. Thanks for the super chat. Malcolm family just launched a lawsuit against New York PD, CIA, FBI, your mama, your daddy, everyone for wrongful death suit. I did not hear about that, but thank you for letting me know, Roger. Wow, that's huge. That's huge. He's talking about Malcolm X, FYI, guys. Shout out to Nolan, says still a hell no for me. You guys are a trip. What's up? The Traveler says Marianne changing her views on Israel is a good step forward. And if she starts calling for defunding the Pentagon. Oh, what's up? N3N says, hi, everyone. Greetings, Dave said, I never vote Dem or Republican. Shout out to American Idol says Sabby is hot. Well, thank you. I'm actually not having my best hair day today, but it is what it is. I was just like, this is all I can do today. Shout out to, what happened to it? I jumped. Sometimes this screen, it moves ahead. Like it jumped way ahead. I was about to say hello. Shout out to Leroy, who's a Sabby member, says, good day, everyone. Shout out to Boy for Love says, we don't trust Marianne. Shout out to Samuel, out of Syria, I meant. Greetings, Sebastian says, hey, y'all. What's up? Humanitarian Class Side says, happy Friday, Sabby. Billionaires handed in their human cards long ago. There you go. What's up? Cecilia says, she couldn't talk to CJ and to Rome. Jeez, man. Marianne, it's not looking too good right now. I don't know what the poll says yet. What's up? Melanie says, yes, she does not have to change a thing. Peace now, two-state solution. I don't agree with the two-state solution. Shout out to Roger Meadows again. Thanks for this super chat. I meant to get you good news last week about rail worker. Yes, I am going to talk about that tonight. So we were on the same, we were thinking the same. We were right here, Roger. We were right here. Wow, lots of comments already. Jeez Louise. All right. What are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate your support. If you are interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators. How did that jump down there? I got to fix that. Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. You guys really do help pay for a lot of things around here that I have to pay for. Thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate that. Okay. Let's go ahead and dive right in. What are we discussing tonight? Now, I do have some good news. We're going to start off with that good, shiny news for you guys. I think you'll be happy to hear about this. Tonight, we are discussing Chris Hedges and Russell Brand, war economy. Very interesting discussion there. I think anytime that we talk about a war, we need to connect it back to the military-industrial complex and the profit to be made from it. I'm also going to discuss Marianne Williamson announcement. So yes, she has made the announcement that she is running for president. I have a lot to talk about in reference to that. And I'm also going to discuss Norfolk Southern Railways sick days. Yes, you heard that right. I am not kidding. That is a bit of good news. And we're actually going to start off with that story. Now, this was announced yesterday. Shout out to Common Dreams for this. Do you remember a while back, the railroad workers came onto the show and they were talking about the need for them to have paid sick days, right? We know that this was voted down in the Senate, so they didn't get those paid sick days. And one of the things that President Biden could have done is he could have actually implemented this by executive order, but that did not happen. Another thing that they had complained about, obviously, were the safety measures on the job because they had cut back the workers and the safety measures were cut back under Donald Trump. So there were multiple things that they were complaining about at that point in time. Well, this was announced yesterday, and I think you guys might be happy to hear this. Shout out to Common Dreams. Under massive pressure amid Ohio crisis, Norfolk Southern agrees to paid sick leave deal. That's right, guys. Back up the truck. And let's go ahead and dive into this one. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because the font. There we go. There we go. Facing intense scrutiny and backlash over the toxic derailment of one of its trains in Eastern Ohio, Norfolk Southern on Wednesday reached a deal with a leading rail union to provide up to a week of paid sick leave per year to around 3,000 track maintenance workers. Now, obviously, I think that this should be given to everyone. But, and honestly, I'm gonna keep it real. I think it should be more than a week, like with it. Yeah, that's just me. But this is huge. This is huge. I don't know if anyone else has talked about this yet today, but let's dive back in. Under the agreement, Norfolk Southern will immediately give 4 workdays of paid sick leave annually to maintenance employees who previously had none, and industry-wide outrage that nearly led to a national rail strike late last year. You see how I say these things are all connected? Now, it's interesting to me because up here it says provide up to a week of paid sick leave, but in the second paragraph it says 4 days. Last time I checked, 4 days is not a week. Let's go on. The deal will also allow employees to utilize up to a maximum of 3 paid personal leave days per year as paid sick leave. So these are personal days. Let me highlight this because it's not the same thing. So some of you may have worked for employers, and I've had this too, where I had personal days and I had sick days, and then I had like the vacation days that you could take. A personal day is just really weird to me. I never understood that. It's just like, what the fuck is a personal day? Like, it's just lump all that together. You know, it's just like, I'm taking a personal day, John. I never really got that. So what they did here is they're giving them 3 paid personal days and 4 paid sick days. I don't understand why they had to split that up, because technically, can't you use a personal day as a sick day as well? Like if you had a doctor's appointment or something like that, if it's a personal day, you don't really, technically, you really shouldn't have to tell them what your appointment is. If it's a personal day, it's supposed to be personal. But all this verbiage, I never really got that. I'm like, just give the people unlimited PTO. And more companies are doing that now, especially the tech companies. They kind of started this jam where they give people unlimited PTO. So if they want to take 2 weeks, they can. And surprisingly, people don't abuse it. And that's what some companies are afraid of. They're afraid if they were to implement something like unlimited leave, that people would abuse it. Actually, studies show that's not true. Let's go on. Tony Cardwell, president of the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division, said in a statement that after 45 years of fighting for this issue, the carrier and union have accomplished what is needed for those who contribute the most to railroad profits, the workers on the ballast line. Speaking to Freight Waves, BMWED media representative Clark Ballou stressed that while the paid sick leave agreement is a good development in an industry that is in dire need of positive momentum, it is not the end of workers' fight for basic quality of life benefits. This is just the beginning. This is not, the end all be all. Our members are tasked with rebuilding the track of the East Palestine derailment, and it is imperative that they have resources available that keep them safe and healthy at a site that many would be apprehensive to work. Paid sick time is one of those resources, but there are several others, and we expect NS to start doing right by their employees and the public and afford all resources necessary to not exacerbate an already bad situation. So if you're working on the rail lines in East Palestine, Ohio, you know that they had this chemical explosion. You know that residents there are already having symptoms such as a constant runny nose, headaches, and burning eyes. Those are just some of the ones I've heard of so far. So they need to make sure that these employees are going to be safe. And I have to say this, and I mentioned this on RBN, and I got to say it again. I have noticed that all the people I've seen on the news in East Palestine, none of these people are wearing any type of PPE. And I would not be surprised if those chemicals are still in the air, are still in the atmosphere. If you have people there who are telling you that their eyes are burning, they're having the headaches, and they're having the constant runny nose, that right there lets me know there is a possibility that the chemical residue could still be in the air. And I think that's what's really weird to me when I see that all these people, like Erin Brockovich is there, kudos to her, Pete's there, like all these people are there, but I don't see any of these people wearing any type of protective gear. So there's that. Norfolk Southern, which has around 19,000 employees total, is the third Class 1 railroad in the past month to agree to provide paid sick leave to some of its workers after aggressively fighting unions' demands for years. See, notice this says some of them. It should be given to all of them, including during recent White House brokered negotiations that produced a contract with 0 paid sick days. Congress voted in December to impose the contract on workers after unions representing a majority of U.S. rail employees rejected it and threatened to strike. The sick leave deal comes as Norfolk Southern is under mounting pressure after one of its trains crashed and spewed hazardous chemicals earlier this month in the small town of East Palestine, Ohio. It is really sad that it took this incident to happen in order for those railroad workers to get paid sick leave. It took a catastrophe to happen. Andrew, I'm going to let you know right now, but if you keep spamming my chat, you're out. Seriously. Moving on. Norfolk Southern must be in the midst of some bad publicity for it to sign an agreement with around 3,000 unionized maintenance of way workers for 7 paid sick days. Now, that is coming from the American Prospect's David Dayan. The East Palestine wreck, its toxic aftermath, and Norfolk Southern's handling of a cleanup process spurred a close examination of the company's efforts in recent years to kill safety rules that could have prevented or mitigated the impacts of the derailment. The company, along with other rail giants, has persistently lobbied both Republicans and Democrats, successfully beating back attempts to upgrade train brake systems and more strictly regulate freight cars carrying hazardous materials. Amid the lobbying blitz against stronger transportation safety regulations, Norfolk Southern paid executive millions and spent billions on stock buybacks, all while the company shed thousands of employees, despite warnings that understaffing is intensifying safety risk. This is capitalism and greed. They were already warned that by reducing staff, this would actually increase safety risk, and they did it anyway. Why? Greed. Just another, I would say another reason to advocate for nationalizing the railroad industry. That came from The Lever, which was reported earlier this month. Norfolk Southern officials also fought off a shareholder initiative that could have required company executives to access, review, and mitigate risk of hazardous material transportation. So pass this on to your friends and your pals and your buds and let them know that they have now reached a deal to give them paid sick days. Now, the railroad workers issued a press release. I've been following them ever since they came on the show. I get emails about their press releases. So let's see what they're saying about this right now. And I did tell you guys also, I do want to invite those guests back onto the show to get their opinion about this issue with East Palestine as well. Here's the most recent press release from the Railroad Workers Union. Now, this was released today. So I'm just going to go down here, make it a little bit bigger because it. Whee! Railroad workers call for immediate action to prevent future train wrecks. East Palestine, Ohio. It has been 3 weeks since the tragic train wreck that devastated this small town. Despite the initial lack of attention it received, politicians and bureaucrats have finally become aware of the tragedy. Railroad Workers United urges everyone concerned not to be distracted by rhetoric, hyperbole, promises, and lies, but instead to focus on the primary reasons for the derailment and to take immediate action to prevent future disasters. The National Transportation Safety Board preliminary report released on February 23rd clearly stated that this was 100% preventable. Guys, hear that? RWU believes that the Class 1 freight rail carriers, including Norfolk Southern, have prioritized profits over safety, cutting maintenance, equipment inspections, and personnel in all crafts while increasing the average train size to 3 miles or more. Again, that's right, Eric, all about money. And we saw this happen locally here in Massachusetts. We saw this happen with our transportation system here under Governor Deval Patrick's administration. They stopped doing the maintenance checks on the subway trains here. They stopped it and the trains start falling apart and trains were catching on fire. So by the time the new administration came in, they were coming into a problem that had already built up under the previous administration. And there was this call to, we have to immediately have a way to fix this. Didn't work out. There's been multiple people that they've brought in over the years to try to fix that problem. But because the maintenance was not being performed on the trains like it's supposed to be every 5 years, it was just a complete disaster already. So there's that. This is what happens when you try to be cheap. When you lay off employees and you stop doing maintenance checks like you're supposed to, and you cut back on safety measures. This is what happens when you try to be cheap. You end up actually paying more in the long run. Let's go on. According to the RWU co-chair Gabe Christensen, railroad workers experience firsthand every day the dangers inherent in the style of railroading. It has impacted their safety, health, and state of mind, and lives on and off the job. RWU General Secretary Jason Doring adds, every day we go to work, we have serious concerns about preventing accidents like this one that occurred in Ohio. As locomotive engineers, conductors, signal maintainers, car inspectors, track workers, dispatchers, machinists, and electricians, we experience the reality that our jobs are becoming increasingly dangerous due to insufficient staffing. We recognize that limits on train lengths and weights are necessary to prevent catastrophic derailments. So they're talking about how to prevent this in the future. So that piece is very key. Here's the demand. RWU demands immediate action by government regulatory agencies and Congress to rein in Class 1 railroads. This action must ensure sufficient staffing to do the job properly, efficiently, and safely, with all trains operating with a minimum of a 2-person crew. So the days of these railroad workers traveling on these trains by themselves, which apparently was happening, they're asking for those days to be over. With a 2-person crew, train length and weight must be capped at a reasonable level to mitigate the increased likelihood of breakdowns, train separations, and derailments. Adequate and proper maintenance and inspections of locomotives and rail cars, tracks and signals, wayside detectors, and other infrastructure must be implemented. Ample training and time off without the harassment of draconian attendance policies must also be standardized. We demand that the railroad be run safely, efficiently, and professionally, and not as some cash cow for Wall Street investors and billionaires. And that's what's happening here. That comes from Hugh Sawyer, who is the RWU treasurer. Much of what is wrong with the rail industry today can be fixed easily and quickly by acting on what is outlined above. We demand action now. So we'll see what happens. We'll keep a close eye on this, and I'll update you. Like I said, I'm going to reach back out to the railroad workers and see if they can come back on, because I want to hear from them again to see how this is all turning out. And then we'll go from there. But we're just going to keep following this story. Going to go to some of the comments here. Oh, I think I read that one. Snake Man Mark. Jim Crow Joe is making sure that all the trains run on time, no matter what. Is that Eartha Kitt? Snake Man, is that Eartha Kitt in the picture with you? That looks like, for those who don't know, the younger people in the chat, Eartha Kitt is she was Catwoman on the Batman TV show, like the old school Batman TV show. I forget the guy's name. What was the guy's name who played Batman? Adam something. Anyway, that looks like Eartha Kitt. Let me know. Mastermind Hour says, I was watching the live Aaron Brockovich town hall when the feed was cut. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for the super chat, Aposimosi. Could it be that they are agreeing to some of the unionized staff demands in order to prevent a barrage of employee lawsuits in the future? That could be the case. Now, according to Erin Brockovich, she still believes that they have or at least the town of East Palestine, Ohio, still has a lawsuit that they could pursue based on what's happened. Terry says, I would sue the sheets off that railroad company, then take my money and leave on that midnight train to Georgia. There you go. The Oracle says nationalize the railroad and healthcare. There you go. Put those two together. Candleboat. Betcha a worker-owned railroad company would make better safety decisions. That's right. That's right. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Marianne Williamson equals Medicare for all. Snake Man, that is Eartha Kitt. I thought so. Holy crap. Holy crap. And thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Marianne Williamson is the peace candidate. I don't know about that. Not based on what she told us on RBN. Okay. Let's move on to our next story. Speaking of Marianne Williamson. So if you have not seen, it has now been announced that Marianne Williamson is running for president and will primary challenge Joe Biden. I know we have interviewed her and other people have, but at that point it wasn't announced. It is now officially announced. Now, let me pull this over here. We're going to talk about a couple of things. First, I'm going to show you the actual announcement. So we're going to see that. Then we're going to talk about the possibility of someone else actually challenging Joe Biden as well. That was also announced. So we're going to talk about that and how that could affect her. And then I'm going to show you some of the problematic rhetoric with this whole FDR Democrat thing, which Marianne Williamson does mention. Other people have mentioned this as well. And I think it's important that when you talk about the days of FDR and the New Deal, I think it is very important that you mentioned some of the problems with the New Deal and the people that were affected, and how you want to do something like that, but you want to make it better. You don't want to make some of those same decisions that were made under the New Deal. So we're going to talk about that tonight as well. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Here's the announcement. Now, MSNBC did cover it. So you do have one mainstream media network or outlet that has decided to cover it. That's probably the first hurdle to get over, right? If you're running, you're trying to primary sitting president, that's probably the first hurdle that you need to get over. Is mainstream media even going to acknowledge that you are running? Well, it seems like they are. But listen to what they have to say. Listen to how they frame it.
Heading into 2024, President Biden has drawn his first Democratic challenger. Best-selling self-help author Marianne Williamson has announced her plans to run for president. Williamson, a progressive Democrat, ran for the White House in 2020, but she dropped out of the race just before the primaries and caucuses got underway. Joining us now to discuss this, White House reporter for Bloomberg, Kayla Gardner. All right.
I just want to chime in here and say something. Someone told me the other day that they didn't know that Marianne Williamson ran for president in 2020. That was kind of surprising to me. I was surprised that that wasn't known to everyone. But yeah, she definitely ran in 2020 and she was on the debate stage. And she did have some memorable moments on the debate stage. So I was kind of surprised to hear that they didn't know that. It's interesting.
Kayla, Marianne Williamson aside, does the White House anticipate other candidates jumping into the Democratic primary the longer that Joe Biden does not say he's running?
I don't think the White House ever expected to get a serious challenger. And I wonder if they would even consider Marianne Williamson a serious challenger at that. And I think they really risk here giving her too much attention. But it is going to be somewhat of...
Let's backtrack. Look at what she already said. See, she's already showing you. Listen to what she says about what they risk. Listen to this.
If they would even consider Marianne Williamson a serious challenger at that. And I think they really risk here giving her too much attention.
Boom. These are the kind of things that used to be a little bit more hidden. They used to be a little bit more covert about it, not as obvious. But she just said this right out in the open on MSNBC. The White House shouldn't risk giving her too much attention. What'd that tell you? So she's openly letting you know that typically she should be suppressed. Don't focus on her too much. Because if you focus on her too much, then it may get out to too many people that someone is actually challenging Joe Biden. So let's not give her too much attention so that the majority of Americans are not aware. If that doesn't let you know how corrupt the system is at play, if it doesn't let you know just how rigged the system is, I don't know what else to tell you. Because if you don't get the approval of mainstream media, the exception was Trump. Because remember, when Trump was running in the beginning, remember Fox News they were laughing at Donald Trump. But once he became the nominee, things changed. But if you don't get the approval of mainstream media, if they're not covering you, if they're not talking about you, it's going to be really difficult for you to win. And this is the same problem that we have with third-party candidates that run for president, right? Mainstream media doesn't give them coverage. They usually just ignore them. But if they get to a certain polling percentage, then they have to acknowledge them, which happened with Jill Stein. At one point, Jill Stein was polling at like 7%. You only need to get to 5% to get the federal funding. So once she got to like that 7%, then mainstream media decided, okay, now we got to smear her, right? But she's just letting you know right now, don't give her too much attention. And they say we have a democracy. Okay, let's go on.
But it is going to be somewhat of an annoyance to have her out there openly criticizing Joe Biden. She's already said she's disagreed with.
She letting you know right now, back it up. This is so blatant.
I think they really risk here giving her too much attention, but it is going to be somewhat of an annoyance to have her out there openly criticizing Joe Biden.
It's going to be an annoyance. It's going to be annoying to have someone criticize Joe Biden. Listen to the vocabulary. This is what I keep trying to tell you guys. Vocabulary is incredibly important. So she said it will be an annoyance to have someone out there openly challenging Joe Biden, criticizing Joe Biden. Because what they really want you to do, if you have criticisms of Joe Biden, you're supposed to do that behind closed doors. You're not supposed to do it openly. And that's exactly why you see even like members of the squad and Bernie Sanders, that's why they won't even criticize Joe Biden openly. Probably behind closed doors, they do. So she letting you know how the game works, people. Lay it all out for people. But she said it will be annoying to have someone doing that. Why is it annoying? As much as the Democratic Party says that we need to value our democracy, we need to have a true democracy, but you don't want anybody to be challenged? Let's go on. The Oracle says an annoyance like a fly buzzing around the room. I know. Like what?
Already said she's disagreed with his view on the economy, which we know is always a huge issue for voters. It was in the midterms and will likely be again in 2024. And so they risk giving her attention, but also having to address this very real criticism that Biden has faced, that he is disconnected with everyday Americans who are going to the grocery store and seeing high prices on eggs and continue to feel the effects of inflation. And so it's certainly an annoyance to them.
It's annoying because this is the thing, you guys. This woman is letting you know the Democratic Party, they don't want you to point out the fact that people are still suffering in this country economically. They don't want that to be referenced. They don't want people to say that because Joe Biden has been denying that. State of the Union address, he said the economy's doing great. We know that's not true. But other people aren't saying it. So they think it will be annoying for someone to come in and admit the truth. But they say we have a democracy. This is why I tell you both parties are trash.
But I don't think we're expecting any other prominent Democrats, especially anyone holding public office, to jump into this race.
You're right. People should just remember the role Jill Stein played in 2016 for an example of a nuisance that someone on the left can be for a Democrat.
You see how they just slide that in there? I don't understand why more Americans don't wake up to this, guys. Look at what he said at the end about Jill Stein. I think people will remember what a nuisance. Listen to this. Let me turn this up. Okay.
Office to jump into this race.
You're right. People should just remember the role Jill Stein played in 2016 for an example of a nuisance that someone on the left can be for a Democrat.
The nuisance that someone on the left can be for a Democrat. A nuisance. This is why I say we don't have a true democracy in this country. You should be able to challenge people. And I don't agree with Marianne Williamson on some of the issues. And I wouldn't support Marianne Williamson anyway, because she's definitely running through the two-party system. But the thing is like, should she not be able to challenge him? Should anyone not be able to run against Joe Biden? This idea that just because he is the sitting president, that he should not be challenged, where does this type of thinking come from? This is the country we live in. I remember Jill Stein was such a nuisance. Why? Because she was speaking truth to power. Because she wasn't a part of the two-party system? Because she actually cared about the climate and the environment? Because she wants to end the wars? That's a nuisance? Because she wasn't taking corporate money? That's the nuisance. The system is inherently corrupt. But there is something that Marianne does need to worry about. And I saw this earlier today. Let me make sure I dive into. We'll get to that in a second. Let's go to the article first. I'm saving that for last. So The Hill has also announced that Marianne Williamson confirmed she will run for president 2024. Marianne, a prominent progressive who ran for president in 2020, confirmed in an interview published Thursday that she will run again for the Democratic nomination for president in 2024. Someone was asking me earlier in the chat if it was going to be independent or Democrat. It's Democratic nomination, which is exactly what I had predicted. So she'll be running through the Democratic Party. That would put her in a Democratic primary against Joe Biden, who has not announced his own plans, but is widely expected to run for re-election next year. Hold on to that piece, because I have an update on that. I wouldn't be running for president if I didn't believe I could contribute to harnessing the collective sensibility that I feel is our greatest hope at this time. That's what Marianne Williamson told the Metal News Service, which is run by Northwestern University, in an exclusive interview. No other Democrats have officially waded into the race yet, making Williamson the first. Williamson previously teased an important announcement that she said she would be making on March 4th, which had been speculated as a presidential announcement. That's another thing, too. I did notice that this announcement arrived before March 4th. So there could be another announcement that's coming March 4th. I don't know. Williamson gained notoriety during the 2020 presidential race, especially during the first several presidential primary debates, where some of her spiritual remarks won her fans online. However, her campaign lasted 1 year and she dropped out in January 2020. During her interview with Metal News Service, she also criticized the DNC's decision to change the early presidential primary schedule, which places South Carolina as the first state in the lineup. South Carolina is where Biden placed first in 2020, is widely credited for helping boost his momentum in the Democratic primary. Let's all remember that. There's a reason why they made that first state South Carolina. It's not just because of diversity, because if it was just because of diversity, they could have easily picked a state like Maryland. They could have easily picked a state like New Jersey. It ain't nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that that was the state that put him over the loop. How can you claim to be a champion of democracy when your own process is so undemocratic? That's what Williamson told the news outlet. The news comes as polling has often shown Democrats less favorable of a Biden re-election bid. One poll from the Associated Press, for example, saw only 37% of members of his party polled supportive of a second Biden term. 37%. Biden was expected to make an announcement that he will be running for re-election in the coming weeks, says multiple sources, though it's unclear that might happen, when that might happen. Let's go ahead and get into that for a second. Now, there's something I do want to show you, because I don't know if that's going to happen. Sabs does not know. And apparently, neither does Rokana. Now, listen to this. Now, shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Growing questions over whether Biden will run in 2024. Listen to this, you guys. Wait for this one. Just wait for it.
Meanwhile, something less important, but eventually impactful for the country is who's going to be the next president of the United States. The one thing we thought almost most of all the intrigue was going to be on is on the right as we wait day by day for more and more contenders to jump in. But then this headline in the Politico popped up yesterday afternoon. Biden may not run, and top Dems are quietly preparing for a plan B. They go on to say that people in the president's orbit say there's no hard deadline or formal processing place for arriving at a launch date. Remember, they thought it was going to be February. Now,
okay, so for those who missed that, they are now saying that Joe Biden may not run. Before people get excited and start dancing, doing the Tootsie Roll and the Cha-Cha Slide, I want to let you know, hold on, because it's not what you think. They're saying that Joe Biden may not run, but there's something else you need to hear.
To 4 people familiar with the president's thinking, a final call has been pushed aside as real-world events intervene. His cloak and dagger trip to Kyiv over the holiday weekend took meticulous planning, and a positive reaction to it was seen internally as providing him with more of a runway to turn back to domestic politics. So they say if he's going to make the message to say he's going to run or not run, it could be in April. But everything's on hold, and quietly behind the scenes, there's a plan B taking shape.
Yeah, and he fell.
Yes, and part of that plan B is that they are already trying to push Kamala Harris. I mentioned this earlier on RBN. They're already trying to push Kamala Harris. She's already made plans to go visit South Carolina. So you know that South Carolina is now the first state in the primary. Why else would she be going there? I want to remind you what's going on right now. We do have the crisis with Russia and Ukraine. Could you imagine Kamala Harris being in charge during that crisis? She's not good on foreign policy. Let's keep it real. But they're already preparing for that behind the scenes. But there's more. Wait. It gets worse.
Yesterday on the stairs, he's 80 years old. People are wondering, is he up for the job for another 4 years?
He could barely talk at the end in that last roundtable.
Right. They said they were originally thinking February. Now they're coalescing maybe around April. It's assumed that he will run in the article, it says, but not decided.
Well, everybody in Biden's circle says he's going to run. So you got to figure there's just an awkward freeze right now. Some people, in the meantime, some people who might run if he wasn't running are strategizing. You know, they're trying to come up with a plan B. But what is very telling, and this is the reason I believe completely with my heart he's running, is he's already staffed up. He's got people on a staff who are getting paychecks. They've also lined up a super PAC. They're going to use Future Forward, which has been used in the past to put on ads touting the president's agenda. And it's just curious. After a week or so of stories in the political news about Nikki Haley and about Donald Trump going to Palestine, that is to say, and Tim Scott and stuff like that, suddenly Politico comes out and does a story about how the Democrats are wondering whether or not Joe's going to run. Joe's going to run.
All right, coming up.
I just said, if he's not going to run, Phil Murphy evidently taking steps, seemed at aiming at the door, keeping the door open.
He just went to Ukraine.
Gavin Newsom in California's got this huge.
So they're pushing Gavin Newsom's name again. And Gavin Newsom had said, I believe it was like 2 months ago, that he would not run, that he changed his mind. He was considering, but not considering anymore. But they're still pushing his name as though he may run. And there's someone else.
Online presence, got this digital media presence. He's just a terrible governor. And Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker, keep that in mind. Ro Khanna says if Biden doesn't run, Bernie Sanders will run, and he hasn't ruled out running himself.
Or maybe Amy Klobuchar also is mentioned in the.
Did you hear the last part? He said, Ro Khanna said, this is coming from Ro Khanna. I don't know why Ro Khanna's speaking for Bernie Sanders, but here we are.
Aiming at the door, keeping the door open.
He just went to Ukraine.
Gavin Newsom in California's got this huge online presence, got this digital media presence. He's just a terrible governor. And Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker, keep that in mind. Ro Khanna says if Biden doesn't run, Bernie Sanders will run, and he hasn't ruled out running himself.
Or maybe Amy Klobuchar also.
Can't make it up. Can't make this up. So Ro Khanna has said that if Biden doesn't run, that Bernie Sanders will be running. And they mentioned Amy Klobuchar. Amy Klobuchar is she needs to go sit down. Handle things in Minnesota first, Amy. Handle the police situation that you were a part of in Minnesota first. But Bernie Sanders again? Why? Why would you run again at this point? 3 times? So Bernie Sanders is actually considering taking working class people money again, because he will. Let's be real. Just to sell them out to the Democrat establishment. And if people do this again, I don't know what to tell you if you fall for this again. I really don't know what to say. But for Bernie Sanders to even consider it again, it's disgusting. And there's something else that you need to think about as well. If that happens, if Biden does not run and Bernie Sanders run, now you have Marianne Williamson and Bernie Sanders. So what happens to the support? In reference to the progressives, those who still believe in doing this progressive strategy, what happens to the support? You are going to split the progressive vote. That's what is going to happen. I'm not voting for either one of them. But for people who do want to, they're going to split the progressive vote. A lot of people still like Bernie Sanders. You'd be surprised. I'm not one of them, but a lot of people still like him. He still has the highest rating among senators. So what would happen then? What would you do? There's people in independent media who have gotten behind Marianne's campaign and who want Marianne to run and support Marianne's race. And some of those people came from the Bernie Sanders movement. So if Bernie Sanders runs again and you have Marianne Williamson running, what would happen? Would Marianne drop out? Because Bernie wouldn't. Hit that like button, guys. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and give it a Hulk smash. That helps me out with the algo. But there's more, because I can't. I'm not even done yet. I'm not even done. Please go ahead and answer that poll when you get the opportunity. Because one of the criticisms that's been made about Marianne potential running for president is the foreign policy. All right. So that's where, for me, it was a no-go. The 2-state solution, I do not support. I do not support continuing this war with Russia and Ukraine. I think we need to be calling for peace. I don't agree. I don't support it on the foreign policy. I'm not there. I think she has good platforms on issues like reparations. She's really good on that. I think she's really good on the healthcare issue. And she came around on that. She didn't always agree with Medicare for all. She came around on that. And she's been out there in the streets, like during the rallies, speaking and participating in those too as well. But she's running through the Democratic Party. And I'm not supporting any candidates running in the 2-party system. Those days for me were done. When I voted in November, I voted for the Green Party candidates that were on the ballot, and everything else I left blank. And then I voted for the ballot initiatives, and that was it. That's it. Now, there's another thing I want to address here. This tweet here from Marianne, she said, FDR Democrats, we need to talk about this because Marcus and I did a deep dive about this whole FDR Democrat thing on this show. But there's something I want to show you because this whole New Deal thing, you got to know what's really happening here. She said, FDR Democrats work unapologetically and unabashedly to support working people of the United States. Keep this in mind, this working people part, because we're going to show you something. But we are only part of the Democratic Party today as the corporatist wing of the party is all for making people feel better, but only so far as it doesn't challenge profit maximization from their major corporate donors. See, corporatist wing of the party, this piece right here, the entire party is corporate. The Democratic Party is a corporation. They actually argued in court that they could pick candidates from behind a closed room. The whole party's corporate. See, I used to think this too. I used to believe that, this part of the Democratic Party is corporate. And then this side over here, where you have the ones that were progressive, or if they still call themselves progressive, they're the ones that were grassroots, so they're not a part of it. No, they're all a part of it. Both parties are owned. They're all owned by corporations. So there's no corporate wing of the party. The whole party is corporate. She goes on to say that Wall Street clearly still owns both major parties. Right. So there's no corporatist wing. It's the entire party. And while the Republicans are definitely much worse, that cannot remain our excuse forever. The point should not be to help people survive an unjust system. It should be to end an unjust system. In the richest country in the world, the economy shouldn't be so hard for the average American to survive. We need more than the alleviation of stress. We need fundamental economic reform. That is the agenda that will beat the Republicans in 2024. Do I agree that we need economic reform? See, I'm going to frame this a little bit differently because I told you guys, from what I've seen from my experience, reforms don't work. Reforms don't work with policing. Reforms didn't work in the education system. Reforms don't work in the healthcare system. You have to tear those systems down and you have to build something new. And so when you talk about economic reform, I would actually phrase it as capitalism has to go. The capitalist system is the reason why you have a poverty issue. It's the reason why you have a homelessness issue. It's the reason why workers are exploited. It's the reason why CEOs were making double their net worth during the pandemic when other people were being laid off and were trying to figure out how they were going to pay their rent. It is a capitalist system. And what I've noticed oftentimes, and I did support Bernie Sanders, I did support AOC and all the other progressives. I went through that whole progressive movement train. I did support them and I did believe in them. But what I noticed over time is that as long as you are going into a corporate corrupt party, the party is going to own you. You are not going to change the party. That is the way the system is built. That is the way it is designed. And for the people who try to change it, those people are pushed out. Don't believe me? Pick up the phone and call Dennis Kucinich. Pick up the phone and call Cynthia McKinney. And they'll explain to you how the Democratic Party pushed them out because they didn't want to play their game. The people who stay are the ones that go along to get along. And the people who push back are pushed out. But what I learned from that progressive movement is that a lot of the people who said they're social democrats or democratic socialists, it's like they just want to put guardrails on capitalism. They don't really want to give workers, the opportunity to control the means of production. That's socialism. And you can't put guardrails on capitalism. We've tried this throughout the years. Because as long as you have capitalism, somebody somewhere is being exploited, even when it comes to social democracy. So when you look at countries like Denmark, these countries that Bernie Sanders likes to point to, and he says these countries have social democracy. They have healthcare for everybody, yada, yada, yada. Yes, they do. But having lived in Europe, what you also have to understand is that even if the people in that country are not being exploited, oftentimes the exploitation is happening somewhere else. And that's how the people in those countries are getting to benefit. So people in Germany may not benefit, may not be exploited by the social democracy that they have there, but people in the global South might be. You have to talk about that. You have to mention it. Second Thought breaks this down very much so. But you have to call out capitalism. This is why these reforms don't work. Now, the piece up here is what I really want to drive home, this FDR Democrats thing, because oftentimes people are bringing this up too. They're saying we have to go back to the FDR Democrats. We have to do, the New Deal, how this helped everyone, but it didn't help everyone. And there were problems with the New Deal that actually hurt some people. So I think it's important when you mention like FDR Democrats and you mention the New Deal, and a lot of people, progressive lane, they go around saying this. I think it's important to mention how there were also flaws of the New Deal that still affect certain people today, and how that should have never happened, and how that needs to be prevented going forward. Who was affected? What are some of the flaws? Marcus and I did a whole breakdown about FDR's New Deal. And I would continue to hear, and it's mainly like a lot of the white leftists in independent media, they love to say this phrase, FDR's New Deal and FDR Democrat. That's what we want back. That didn't help Black people, though. It didn't help indigenous people. And one of the things that came from the New Deal was the housing issue, which we still have a problem with today. Let's get into that. Because in this clip, they are going to explain to you that the New Deal was really more so about saving capitalism, not saving people. And it damn sure wasn't really trying to save Black people. Listen to this.
This community in these homes are white, unless you're a servant.
The subdivision is called Ladera, and the racist covenants were attached to the deeds of all 500-some homes here. The rules are no longer enforceable or even legal, but they've been on the books since the neighborhood was laid out 70 years ago. And they help illustrate how so many of America's suburbs ended up segregated.
It hurts. It hurts to be told you're not welcome. Forget welcome, you're not allowed.
It so offended me, I thought, well, this has to be offending everyone who buys property here.
So some of Ladera's residents set out to understand how this happened. And it turned out these relics of segregation grew out of a historical moment more often remembered for progressivism and inclusion.
I pledge myself.
So this is FDR. And this came out of progressivism, which was supposed to be part of inclusion. And a lot of people say this FDR came in and he saved the people and saved the workers. No, he saved capitalism. And the only reason why the New Deal was implemented is because the workers rose up and pushed back, because the people pushed back. But even then, not everybody got those benefits. And some people actually were hurt by it. Let's go on.
To a new deal for the American people.
The New Deal programs launched between 1933 and the end of the Second World War transformed society. But Black Americans reaped far fewer benefits from these programs than white Americans.
The New Deal expanded government capacities in a way that provided economic rights for people, the right to capital, the right to a job, the right to health care, the right to old age pension. What was problematic is that that right was not inclusive.
One of the clearest examples of this came when New Deal agencies began insuring affordable home loans. Before backing the loans, agencies mapped communities across the country, dividing them into zones judged to be higher or lower risk for banks. Records show a key factor federal mapmakers used to determine this perceived risk was race. This practice, called redlining, largely cut people of color off from affordable borrowing.
It's not a case.
So what you have to understand is that that is where redlining came from. It came from the New Deal. And I hear a lot of people, they'll mention this in reference to voting. They'll say, oh, the redlining and da-da-da-da. But then they'll praise the New Deal. And that's not to say there weren't good things that came from the New Deal. But how can you leave out what the New Deal did to Black people, what the New Deal did to Indigenous people? How can you leave out the redlining? And this includes, and I'm sorry, we got to say this includes people in legacy left independent media who leave this out. And so either you don't know the history or you're leaving it out intentionally. So nobody getting up there trying to tell me we're going to bring back the FDR Democrat. Nah, bud, there are problems there. There are problems there. And you need to call it out.
That you just had these bigoted bankers and these bigoted homeowners. The federal government was culpable. Black people, by design, were excluded from this benefit.
Yep.
It's exactly what happened in Ladera. In the late 1940s, a mixed-race group of about 100 families banded together to build cheap homes near Stanford University. Workers, teachers, and professors, including the novelist Wallace Stegner, formed a cooperative to buy and transform a tract of hilly ranch land into an affordable suburb named Ladera. But the project soon stalled.
No bank would give them the loan to build these homes. The banks wouldn't do it because the Federal Housing Administration wouldn't insure their loans. Because of these 100 members of the cooperative, 3 were African Americans.
At the time, the Federal Housing Administration explicitly recommended that race restrictions be used in new suburban developments. Its lending manual even included instructions for banning buyers who weren't the race for which new homes were intended.
And this is exactly how Black people were kept out of the suburbs. Again, this came from the New Deal. And a lot of people, they want to talk about rep, but they don't take it all the way back to where it came from. And you even see some effects of that today. Even now, I went through the home buying process. Even now, there's still certain neighborhoods, whether you have the credit score, whether you have the down payment or not, and a lot of you in the chat, you know this, there's still certain neighborhoods and certain realtors that will not sell to certain people who are of a certain complexion. Even if it lists that the house is on the market, all of a sudden when you show up, oh, we sold that house already. Then your white friend goes in and, oh, magically the house is still on the market. So the redlining that came from the New Deal, it was a way that prevented Black people from getting into those suburbs, thus prevented Black people from becoming homeowners. And without the home ownership, you don't have the opportunity to establish some type of generational wealth and to increase your net worth. So I'm not too fond of the whole, I'm an FDR Democrat. We need a New Deal Democrat. I'm not too fond of it. We'll play a little bit more here and then we'll move on.
Segregation that this program alone created is responsible for much of the racial inequality we have in this country today.
Unable to find financing, the Ladera Cooperative disbanded and sold the land to a private developer who built Ladera as a whites-only community.
Yep.
By the 1950s, this mix of federal policy and private discrimination left few options for Black Americans seeking homes in this part of California.
My dad got involved with the Palo Alto Stanford branch of the NAACP. They were proving that there was housing discrimination. And it was notorious here, very subtle, but it was notorious. My dad could easily pass for white, My mom was brown skinned. You knew who she was. It was actually something that was very painful for my mother because my dad would go to rent an apartment or to buy property. They'd say, wonderful. He'd say, let me bring my wife. And as soon as she came back with him, they would say, no, this is no longer available.
When my parents came here from Alabama, they figured, okay, this is a nice area. We don't have to worry about our kids getting lynched. There's not open racism, but they didn't factor in that there was a slew of hidden racism.
Yep.
About 9 miles from Ladera, Elwyn Rayner's family,
that's referred to as covert racism, by the way, the hidden racism,
opened up this service station in one of the only areas open to Black American property buyers, now known as East Palo Alto.
The African Americans were guided to this area. Any houses on the other side of the freeway were considered to be out of their price range. Or
see what I'm saying? This is what they'll do. They'll direct you to a certain area. I had a friend of mine at the time, well, he is still white. Damn. I was about to say at the time he was white. He is still white. His wife is Black. When they first moved here, he told me that the realtors kept trying to direct them to the neighborhoods where it was only Black people and would not show them houses in the other suburban neighborhoods. That's intentional. Every now and then you might get lucky and you get a good realtor who's not looking at all that jazz, but it happens. It happens.
The interest rate alone would kill that dream of them owning a house because they couldn't afford it. It's like they say you're on the wrong side of the tracks. For us, it was the wrong side of the freeway.
For decades, East Palo Alto and neighboring Belhaven were unincorporated communities without a city government, where housing shared space with heavy industry, and residents enjoyed few of the amenities available to the majority white suburbs, like Palo Alto, Menlo Park, or Ladera.
We had roads that were badly paved. We had many a neighborhood that did not have sidewalks. We had a school district that was grossly underfunded. We were walking in the middle of the street instead of walking on sidewalks. We had bad lighting. We had bad water. Mm-hmm. We didn't even have a city. We didn't have a place where we could go and complain even.
Notice how he said they had bad water. So see, this is another thing. You're put into the communities. You're prevented from going into the communities where you can have more resources and you can have clean water. So therefore, you're pushed into the communities that have bad water, where you have the environmental issues. And you know what else that means? That means that your life expectancy drops. That happens here in Boston as well. If you go to Roxbury, between the intersection of Roxbury and the wealthy side of the South End, if you're standing on that side of the street where you're in the South End, the wealthy side, because there's two different parts, your life expectancy is higher. As soon as you cross that street and you go over to Roxbury, your life expectancy drops by 30 years. So I'm not going to play the entire video in here, but if you want to see the full video, the name of this video is called Whites Only Suburbs, How the New Deal Shut Out Black Homebuyers. That's just one of them. Another one of the issues was the GI Bill. Like, there were so many ways where the New Deal actually shut out Black people and Native Americans. So I think, I get what Marianne's saying when she mentions that, but I think it's important to mention now, FYI, that New Deal didn't include everybody. So we need to do something better. I think it's important to add that piece. But that whole, I'm a FDR, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. You done lost me with that one, not doing it. But hopefully you learned something here tonight. If you didn't know that before tonight, now you do. Going to go to some of the chats here. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. West, that is Eartha. Yep, town hall feed was cut. That's interesting. I'm going to have to try that. I'm gonna try to look it up and see if I can find anything about it. Mary said, sorry, not sorry. I do not trust Marianne on her stands. Thanks for the super chat, Snort. Klobuchar needs to go rent an outhouse in Tasmania. Okay. The Oracle. Bernie Sanders wants to prove that he is the best sheepdog and shepherd, which is different from the good shepherd. Mario says, I'm not wasting a single penny or minute on a Democratic candidate this cycle. I'll be at the park tabling for solidarity movements. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Joe Biden is running. Jill Biden confirmed it. Andrew, I think you got some issues. I don't know what's going on with you tonight. I ain't seen you in here before either. Thank you for the super chat, Egg64. Landlords are actively turning down Section 8 vouchers these days, even during a pandemic. So this absolutely tracks. Bingo. Angela says, Galesburg, Illinois has enacted program to prioritize homes for families of people who were discriminated against for housing. Such a tiny step, so much more is needed. I agree, Angela. And thank you for the super chat, Lorez. Redlining and no GI Bill for free college ownership and college are the two main ways to get and hold generational wealth. Black Americans excluded from both. This is the point that I really want to drive home, because it's not just about the 40 acres and a mule that did not happen, that was promised by General Sherman after slaves were freed. It's not just about that. It's about everything else that happened after that. How when there were times where we could have been given those opportunities, we were prevented from having it. So yes, thank you so much for saying that, Lorez. Absolutely. I'll take the comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. The corruption isn't that we have a system that only allows for two parties, but the fact that we have a system that allows for parties to exist at all. The role that Jill Stein played, Dr. Stein was third party. I thought Marianne was running as a primary challenger. The F is he talking about? Look, Schultz said on the stand in DNC fraud lawsuit, they do not have to pick who primary voters pick. This is exactly, guys, we need to go over that on the show one night. One night, I think we're going to do a case study. We're going to dive into that DNC fraud lawsuit. And thank you for this one as well. They choose in the primary who they want to screw the voters. So always know that the candidate that you love going into the primary will not be the same candidate coming out of the primary as the nominee, because they had to do the corporate tap dance compromise. Because if they didn't, they wouldn't be chosen. So please save it. Please save it. That she'll get us Medicare for all. Just stop. You want it. Run a CBI, Medicare for All public bank amendment at home. And thank you for this as well. Sabrina, I think these people who want Bernie are those who are in the upper middle class who can actually financially donate with no problem, because every time I talk to poor people and working class regular folk, ordinary people, folk isn't even there, I threw that in, regular ordinary people, they're not really that hopped up on Bernie. Also keep in mind where FDR was successful is when the military industrial complex was in infancy and came before CIA/NSA existed to suppress left worker movements. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for this one as well. Oh, Sabby, I was just on a Zoom last week with Grassroots Philly Financial, spoke on how public banks can play a role in financing cooperatives. Here's the link. Public banks act as a replacement insurer for the FDIC, so they back up community banks, helping them to secure loans for their customers like Black-owned community banks, which less likely to discriminate. Thank you so much. Well said. We are moving on to our final story. Moving on. All right. So Chris Hedges and Russell Brand had a pretty interesting conversation about the war economy. And I think it's important for us to remember when we're talking about these wars, Russia, Ukraine, etc., it's important to understand that the military industrial complex profits off of it. And that's really what it is all about. It is all about profit. If there was no profit in war, we would have a hell of a lot of peace. Don't write that down. No, I'm just saying it's true. Like we'd have a hell of a lot of peace if you think about it. So let's get into this discussion with Russell Brand and Chris Hedges. I'm going to chime in here and there because I thought there were some really powerful things that were said in this discussion. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, don't forget to smash that like button. Thank you.
Today we're going to be talking about the perpetual state of war. We have 800 bases around the globe. There has to be a massive retraction. The repackaging of these conflicts that has changed the marketing of these wars. After World War II, you had a perpetuation of what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. We'll be talking about the escalation of conflict between Western nations and China, the impossibility of alliances outside of centralized establishment politics, and when the liberal left went wrong. Stay free with Russell Brand. See it first on Rumble. Thanks for joining us, Chris. It's lovely to talk to you again.
Thanks, Russell.
Chris, we get straight into this new permanent war state that we appear to be living in. It felt like during the 60s when there was the Vietnam conflict and the Korea Wars, that this was a period that had been committed to history, that there was no appetite to see American bodies returning home posthumously. But since then, it seems that, America has been continually engaged in conflict, and it's the repackaging of these conflicts that has changed the marketing of these wars. Why is it that there is a necessity, whether it's Afghanistan, Ukraine, or a potential forthcoming Taiwan-oriented conflict between the US and China, that there appears to be a necessity for ongoing conflicts? Is it built into the American economic model? Why is it necessary, and why is it so difficult to get balanced reporting around this subject, Chris?
That is a very good question. So one of the things that he pointed out was the Vietnam War. We've been talking a lot about this recently, and I think people have to understand, when I watch documentaries about the Vietnam War, they show the casualties, they talk about the civilian casualties, and apparently during that time, it was actually shown on television. So people were able to see how many civilians were affected by that war, in particular, women, children, people that had nothing to do with this conflict and just trying to live their everyday life. So there was that. And then also there was the draft, and we haven't had a draft since. So because of the draft, there were people who had no intention of ever joining the United States military, had their lives flipped upside down because they were selected to go fight that war. And people who were as young as 18, 17 years old, people were young boys. I'm sorry, but I look at it as you're 17, you're still not really an adult. You're so young, right? So because of the draft, there were more Americans that were directly impacted by the Vietnam War. As time went on, that was no longer the case. Less and less people enlist in the United States military today. That is why the numbers are down. This is why they're trying to recruit kids via Call of Duty video games or via Twitch. I talked about this before, how they try to actively recruit kids on Twitch nowadays because the numbers are down. Deborah says we have the poverty draft. That's a good point. I didn't think of it like that. But there was a period there where after the Vietnam War, we didn't have this type of war. What do you want to call it? Warmongering? We didn't have this type of warmongering in place, but that changed. And that has to do with profits. And so what you have to understand, what Chris is going to dive into here, is the war economy and the reason why we continue to have these conflicts abroad, despite what they may have taught you in school. Because I too used to believe that we were the good guys and we were going over there to stop the bad guys. Notice how the bad guys were never us. This was every time it was always someone else. It was never us. So that's something to keep in mind. So let me let him go on here.
Yes, it's completely built into the American economic model, as Seymour Melman, the scholar at Columbia, pointed out in books like The Permanent War Economy. So after World War II, you had a perpetuation of the military, what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex, and it justified itself through the Cold War, although it created nuclear arsenals that could wipe out Soviet cities 10 times over. And then, of course, it fed the proxy wars that were very much part of the Cold War. I spent 5 years covering the war in El Salvador, for instance, in the early 1980s. But Vietnam was a very seminal point because you're right. The American middle class did not want their kids coming home in body bags. And so there were two things that happened after Vietnam.
I want to comment on the body bags part just really quick. Also, during the Vietnam War, boys who I say this in the most polite way, rich people and wealthy families were able to find ways to prevent their sons from being drafted. I'm just going to call it what it is, because that's exactly what happened. So a lot of times the people who were being drafted were people who came from poor or working class backgrounds. So for people who were wealthy, they had the resources to make sure that didn't happen to their son, or they had ways of dodging it, like dodging the draft. In fact, Bill Clinton was one of those that dodged the draft. So just keep that in mind, that class, again, when we talk about this particular conflict, class is still a factor.
One, there was a kind of reckoning that the country asked questions about themselves, or we did as Americans, that we hadn't asked before. There was a kind of, let's call it a period of 10 or 15 years of anti-militarism because of the Vietnam War, which then Ronald Reagan attempted to, I think, successfully restore the quote-unquote good name of war. The other thing is that the military or the militarists realized that they had to abolish the draft, that if they were going to continue the policy of permanent war, they were going to have to fight it with poor kids who didn't have any options and comprised a small, largely powerless demographic within the country in the single digits in terms of.
That's right. So what they did, and this is something that my dad went through, what they did is they actually started sending military recruiters to poor and working class Black and brown neighborhoods. And those were the people that they started to target, the people who didn't have the benefits that the military was offering. The healthcare benefits, TRICARE was phenomenal. I'll be honest. Like, you rarely have to pay for anything. The healthcare benefits, the college benefits, the traveling benefits, kids that had never even left like the Bronx. Now they would get to travel the world. We're going to pay for your housing, so you don't have to pay rent. You don't have to pay for your mortgage. If you do decide to get a house, you can get what's called a VA loan, where you don't have to put anything down. Like, those types of benefits that a lot of those kids would have never been able to have because of the neighborhoods they lived in and the lack of resources that they had in those communities. They targeted those groups, and they really solved that problem. Just like that. Let's go after the poor Black and brown kids. Let's go after them. That's how we'll keep our numbers up, since we got rid of the draft. So there you go.
Percentages. Much of my own family on my mother's side comes from rural Maine, and they are the classic cannon fodder for the military. Unfortunately, I would also add, they're quite susceptible to the propaganda, the flag waving, gun-toting. I'm talking about my own family, but that's another issue. So those two things happened, and that allowed them to continue with war. Now, I covered the revolutions in Eastern Europe. I was in Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Romania, 1989. So I was there with the collapse of the Soviet Union and acutely aware of the promises that have been made to Gorbachev not to expand NATO beyond the borders of a unified Germany. In fact, we were all talking about the peace dividend, which shows you how naive we all were.
That was actually right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So when the Berlin Wall fell, that was supposed to be the end to the expansion, to the NATO expansion.
Believing that there would not be this necessity to commit such large quantities of money, material, research, and human capital into the war industry. Well, the war industry had no intention of going away. That's why it pushed the expansion of NATO, although, of course, as I think you've mentioned on your show, the promises were made not to do. There was a violation of the promises made to Moscow. And I think that expansion of NATO was pushed for two reasons. One, it made the arms industry billions in profits because countries, Poland, et cetera, had to reconfigure their militaries to be compatible with NATO equipment, but also hubris. That's when the United States began to talk about the unipolar world, which is just a fancy way of saying we dominate. Whatever we do, we can do anything we want and nobody can get in our way. Those two things led to the conflict with Ukraine. And just to close, I think that there's a deep understanding now certainly within the U.S. military, that they cannot win a war of attrition against Russia. Russia has bled and bled profusely, no question. But a war of attrition, Ukraine can't win. And I was in the first Gulf War. I was in southern Iraq after the war. I was in the Shiite uprising in Basra, and then I was taken prisoner by the Iraqi Republican Guard. But being there, we had no clean water, we had no electricity, the schools were bombed, were destroyed, the hospitals were destroyed. That is a classic tactic that the U.S. military uses. It's what the Russians are using, and that's why you see this panic and sending M1 Abrams tanks. We can talk about that later, which will be largely useless. Talking about uranium-depleted weapons, now you have, through Poland, lobbying to send F-15, F-16 fighter jets. Very, very dangerous. But of course, as we saw with Afghanistan, it doesn't matter whether they can win. The Washington Post published the Afghan papers, which illustrated that the military and political leadership in the United States knew at best Afghanistan would be a stalemate. But
20 years in Afghanistan. Now, there was a point that he mentioned that I think is really important and we really need to address. He said, this is how we got to the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I know a lot of times we bring up, well, this had already started like 8 years ago, goes all the way back to 2014. But actually, it goes back even further, because if NATO would not have expanded after the fall of the Berlin Wall, we wouldn't have even gotten to the 2014 point to get us to this point. And so I'm glad that Chris Hedges mentioned that. But again, why did it happen? To make money for the military industrial complex, to make money for the weapon contractors. This is important for people to really understand, because somewhere along the way, the United States government realized that there was money to be made in war, even if that meant that people were going to die. It's not about winning. And so some people don't like when I say this, but I'm going to say it. The fact that the United States government is continuing to give billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine to try to win this war, it is a farce. Ukraine is not going to win this war. You have to understand that. Russia, if they need to, they can also get China to back them. There is a thing called BRICS. They have no chance of winning. By the time this is all said and done, Ukraine's economy will probably be crumbled. The country will be ruined. It'll be in shambles economically. And a lot of more people will be dead. Now, mainstream media isn't going to tell you that. Because then otherwise, if they were to tell you that, how do you justify sending billions of dollars to the country? How do you not justify calling for peace? So they're not going to tell you what I just told you. So what's the point of it? The point of it is to have a never-ending war. It's not about winning the war. It's just to continue to funnel money into the military-industrial complex. That's it. People have to understand that. That's how you get 20 years in Afghanistan. Let's go on.
The war went on for many years. This was also true in Vietnam, because war is a business, very lucrative. Raytheon, Halliburton, Northrop Grumman, etc. And we just have been unable to push back against this militarism that is disemboweling the country. If you drive across the United States, our cities and towns and communities are just desolate.
If you're watching us on YouTube now, we are only going to be with you there for another couple of minutes before we click over to being exclusively on Rumble, because I'm going to be asking Chris about the reconstruction of Ukraine, in particular the role of BlackRock and JP Morgan. And
notice he mentioned BlackRock and JP Morgan. So those are other things. So you can see the rest, because they probably didn't want to talk about that piece on YouTube, to be honest. But this video is called "They're Destroying the Country" with Chris Hedges. And this is Stay Free with Russell Brand preview. So to see the full interview, you're going to have to go over to Rumble. So I think Russell Brand is another one that has like an exclusive show on Rumble. Like it's him, Kim Iverson, and Glenn Greenwald. So typically it seems like what they'll do is they'll put like part of the interview on YouTube, but the full interview is on Rumble. That's actually pretty smart. That makes people go over to Rumble. So if you want to see the full discussion, you have to hop on over to Rumble to see the rest of that. And I'm pretty sure they probably talked about things that he probably didn't want to put on YouTube because of the censorship. That's probably what this was happening. That's probably why. But yeah, if you're not following them on Rumble, I highly recommend that you do so, because I know for one, like Kim Iverson's show was really good. And Glenn Greenwald's show, System Update on Rumble's really good. Like you guys should check it out. So I'm gonna go to some of the comments here, but you guys get the point. You get the point. And in reference to the budget, did I pull up the defense? I didn't pull it up. I wanted to show you the defense budget. I'm going to show you this really quick, because I want to show you the difference so you could actually see what it was like during the Vietnam War, how much the defense budget was compared to now. And like, you just can't, that's what I'm trying to tell you guys. Like, they can't even make excuses for it anymore. Like, I don't understand how you can even defend it. Like, looking at it now, I'll make this bigger for the people in the back. This is the U.S. military spending defense budget from 1960 to 2023. I'm just going to show you the graph because it's easier that way for you to see what's going on. This is over the years, you guys. Now, I got to shrink it a little bit. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. So you can see the years. 1960, you have 47.35 billion. Let's look at where we are today. Here. Right here. 867 billion. You see how it just continued over the years? Up, 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 up. There was a drop here. So at some point there were cuts. 1991, there was a little bit of a drop. That's over 300 billion. There were also drops right around here. 1998, there was a decrease. That go up. And it's starting to go up a little bit here in 2001. And then honestly, 04, 03, this is when we're going into Iraq, if I'm not mistaken. 2003 to 2011, I believe, was Iraq. So that makes sense as to why it would increase when we're at war. But what doesn't make any sense is when you get to 2011, we pulled out of Iraq. Then it decreases because we pulled out of Iraq. But then look here. Why did it jump? Go right here. 2018, 682 billion. And then we're going to 2019, 734 billion. So what was happening in 2019? Do you see what the problem is, guys? So even now, it's just like they just increase it. They don't need a reason anymore. Like, we don't have to say we're at war to increase it anymore. That's the problem. Eric, can you put the link to this chart in the chat for people so that they can play around with that at home when they have more free time? You see, guys, like, this is a problem. How we go from 1960, 47.35 billion. This is insane. All this money. A hot mess. So like I said, they don't need to have an excuse for it anymore. They just increase it just because. Thank you for the super chat, Carlos. President Johnson reversed General Sherman's order. There was nothing the general could have done. The commander-in-chief outranks a general. President Johnson. Thank you for the super chat, Snork. Also, journalists filming Vietnam were not murdered. That's a big one, Snork. That's a big one right there. Thank you for mentioning that. Pete, I skipped ahead because I missed being live. Love y'all, and Sabby is so well spoken. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Pete. Joe John, Sabby, please get on Tucker and talk to 50 million people. Bless you. You are a truth teller. I don't think I haven't been so nice about Tucker Carlson. I do not like Tucker Carlson. I don't think Tucker Carlson would bring me on, to be honest, but I do not. But I hear where you're coming from. Thank you for the super chat, Miss. Don't forget McNamara's folly. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat, Egg. There's more employees and contractors in the DOD than the whole of the People's Republic of China. I believe it, Egg. I believe it. And thank you for the super chat, Miss. They want Ukraine to crumble so they can implement their 100% digital city. I could see that. I could see that happening, and it'd just be another fallen country. I'll take the message on Rockfin, Eric. I think there's one on there. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Let's not forget, when they get desperate enough due to lack of military recruitment is just not working. Do not be surprised if the U.S. government engineers plan to attack its own people, then propagandize us to think that it was that guy who did it. You're not going to take the MIC down from the top. They got their hooks into every community legislative district. You read the Newsday article I sent you, right? I believe so. People send me articles all the time. Sometimes I forget what I read. And thank you for this tip as well. The reason why they were able to get away with it is because they were the biggest employer in that area of Long Island, and small businesses got the runoff, like diners and other places where they'd go for lunch. You got to kneecap the MIC by coming in from underneath and doing things at the state and local level, pumping up worker co-ops and public banks, all that to create alternative high-paying jobs, weaning us off the MIC fix. I hear you. I hear you. All right. You guys know we have been highlighting. Oh, go ahead. I see you, Eric. Go ahead. Let's do that. We'll do the poll. All right. So here's those poll results, you guys. Would you vote for Marianne Williamson if she changed her position on Israel and Ukraine? So that's her position with Israel-Palestine was the two-state solution. And with Russia and Ukraine was to continue to send Ukraine money. What I'm asking is if she were to flip that and to say, to call for peace and to stop sending money to Ukraine. And also with Israel and Palestine, to not support the two-state solution and to support BDS. But she doesn't support those. And that's why I asked those questions, because some people said she had to change her views on foreign policy. Now, this poll, it looks very different than it did before when I went live. So would you vote for Marianne if she changed her position on Israel and Ukraine? 15% of you said yes, 63% said no, and 23% said maybe. Yeah, this is definitely, how many votes is this, Eric? 557 votes? Okay. Yeah, it definitely changed, because when I went live, it was actually the yes choice was actually in the lead. So things definitely changed. I wouldn't be surprised if some people jumped on just to vote and peaced out. I'm just being honest. Well, Marianne, I don't know if you're watching this, but that's a something. That's a something there. Now, we have been highlighting people for Black History Month every night. I forgot last night, but every night it's been a different person that we feature. And tonight, the person that I'm featuring, the reason why I am talking about her today is because something really huge just happened with her. So we got to talk about her. So tonight's spotlight is, let me go in, the one and only Angela Davis. Now, something big happened with Angela Davis literally like 2 days ago. I don't know if you heard about it, but first I want to give you a little bit of a background story. She's known as a civil rights activist. I don't know anyone who really has never heard of her. Like, to be honest, her opinions politically today are a little bit different than they were back then. But let's go ahead and take a look at who Angela Davis is and how it all started for her.
Angela Davis had a humble and determined childhood. She was the daughter of a teacher and an industrial worker. She grew up in a time of deep racial segregation in the American South and faced discrimination and racism on a daily basis. Her parents were active in the civil rights movement and instilled in her a sense of social justice and the importance of education from an early age. Despite the challenges she faced, she excelled in school and graduated as valedictorian of her high school class. Her academic success earned her a full scholarship to Brandeis University, where she studied French and philosophy, and
that's here in Massachusetts, by the way. Brandeis is in Waltham, Massachusetts.
Was one of only 3 black students on campus at the time. Her time at Brandeis marked her first exposure to the civil rights movement, and she became involved in the movement early on, joining the Black Panthers and working as a leader in the Communist Party USA.
Yes, she was a part of the Communist Party USA. Now, her views politically today are different. Somebody said Rashad the Great said she's an oh man, some of the radical revolutionaries from back in the day are not as radical today, and that's unfortunate, but let's go on.
After her undergraduate degree, she went on to attend the University of Frankfurt, where she earned her PhD in philosophy. This education would become the foundation for her future activism and scholarship. Her early life experiences and education laid the foundation for her future activism and her unwavering commitment to social justice. Angela Davis's activism and scholarship has focused on issues of race, gender, and class, and she has been an advocate for the oppressed throughout her life. One of Davis's biggest accomplishments was her role in the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Her activism helped to bring attention to issues of racial inequality and police brutality, and she was a vocal advocate for the rights of prisoners. She became involved in the movement early on, joining the Black Panthers and working as a leader in the Communist Party USA. Her speeches and writings helped to raise awareness about the injustices faced by Black Americans and advocated for their rights. Her activism and scholarship helped to shape the civil rights movement in the 1960s and continue.
Damn, y'all revealing everybody. Terry said Bobby Rush sold out also. Oh my God. Oh man.
Continues to inspire others today. Throughout her career, Angela Davis has continued to be a voice for the marginalized and oppressed, using her platform to speak out against injustices and advocate for change. She has been an inspiration for generations of activists, and her contributions to the civil rights movement have had a lasting impact on American society. One of the most defining moments of Angela Davis's career was her trial and acquittal in 1970. She was arrested and charged with conspiracy in connection with a prison escape attempt, which resulted in the deaths of several individuals. The trial became a major media event and a cause célèbre of the civil rights movement. Davis faced intense scrutiny and was the subject of a nationwide manhunt prior to her arrest. Her legal team faced numerous obstacles, including the dismissal of several African American jurors, and the judge's decision to allow evidence of her membership in the Communist Party to be introduced. Despite the odds against her, Davis was able to prove her innocence, and she was acquitted on all charges. The trial and acquittal of Angela Davis brought her international attention and made her a symbol of resistance to racism and political repression. Her acquittal was a major victory for the civil rights movement and demonstrated the power of a determined individual to overcome injustice. It also marked a turning point in Davis's career, and she became a leading figure in the civil rights movement and an advocate for social justice and equality. Angela Davis is not only known for her activism, but also for her work as an academic and author. Throughout her career, she has been a professor of ethnic studies at San Francisco State University, the University of California, Santa Cruz, and the University of California, Berkeley. In addition to her teaching, Davis has also been a prolific author, writing several books on subjects such as race, gender, and social justice. Her first book, Women, Race and Class, was published in 1981 and has since become a classic in the field of feminist studies. She has also written Blues Legacies and Black Feminism, which explores the connection between the blues, black feminism, and the civil rights movement, and Are Prisons Obsolete?, which argues for the abolition of the prison industrial complex. Davis has also been a major figure in the feminist movement, and her work has been influential in shaping the discourse on intersectionality and the experiences of Black women. Through her,
I think it's important to remember why is it that the establishment maybe did not consider her to be a threat, and I think you have to remember that she was an academic. So there is a class role here. And she was a part of that academic class. She really was. So I think maybe that's why they didn't perceive her as the same type of threat as they did someone like Fred Hampton.
Writing and teaching, Davis has been able to share her insights on social justice and inspire generations of activists and scholars. She has continued to speak out on issues of racial and social justice, and has been a vocal advocate for the rights of marginalized communities. She has also been a prominent voice in the movement to abolish the prison industrial complex, and her work has helped to bring attention to the issue of mass incarceration in the United States.
Damn, everybody coming after Angela Davis tonight. Deanna said, I think she was pro se, defended herself in her trial. She's an op now, though, for a check. Damn.
Davis has also been recognized for her contributions to the civil rights movement and social justice. She has received numerous awards and honors, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Civil Rights Museum and the United States Presidential Medal of Freedom. Angela Davis is a trailblazer and a true icon of the civil rights movement. Through her tireless activism, she has fought against racism and oppression, and her work has helped to bring about real change in the world. She has been a powerful voice for the marginalized and oppressed, and has served as an inspiration to countless others. Her childhood, her activism, her scholarship, and her later years all have played a major role in shaping the world we live in today. She has been a leader, an educator, and a voice for change. Angela Davis will always be remembered as a true leader and hero in the fight for civil rights and social justice. Her legacy will continue to inspire future generations to fight for a more just and equal world. This has been another.
Okay, so that's a little bit there about Angela Davis. I know some people say that she was like the safe activist in a sense that like she was a part of that class where they weren't really going to come after her the way that they came after like Fred Hampton or Huey Newton, like that kind of thing. But the reason why I wanted to mention her tonight, and especially tonight, is because it turns out Angela Davis found out some very interesting news literally yesterday. So this was published yesterday, February 23rd. So apparently, Angela Davis shocked to learn she's a descendant of the Mayflower on Finding Your Roots. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen that show before. I've seen it before. but they help you go back and track your ancestry, right? That's it. It became a big deal when Ben Affleck was on there and he found out his family owned slaves and he was like freaking out and shit. Anyhow, it says, as a guest on PBS show Finding Your Roots, Angela Davis, civil rights activist, philosopher, and author, learned a surprising fact about her ancestry. According to Salon, the former Black Panther sought out answers to burning questions about her maternal grandparents' side of the family. As her mother grew up in a foster home, Davis didn't know important facts about her roots. Instead, host Henry Louis Gates Jr. presented the 79-year-old with results that left her shocked. Dun, dun, dun. You are descendant from one of the 101 people who sailed on the Mayflower. Gates said while giving Davis a manifest revealing the name of her 10th great grandfather. Yeah. Let me see if they let me show it. YouTube sometimes, I don't know. YouTube might be like, we're not going to let you play this. Let's see. Oh, man. Yeah. Do you know who you're looking at? That is a list of passengers on the Mayflower. Now, this is Henry Louis Gates. I guess this is the moment that she realized, let me make this. I don't know why this is so big. I did this on my own. Whee! All right, let's see. Oh, it's only 49 seconds.
Did not come here on the Mayflower.
Your ancestors. That is a list of the passengers on the Mayflower.
No, I can't believe this. No, my ancestors did not come here on the Mayflower.
Your ancestors came on the Mayflower.
No.
You are descended
No.
from one of the 101 people who sailed on the Mayflower.
Man, you guys are brutal with her tonight. Ricky said sell out. Let me take this down. You guys are brutal. Oh, man. Jeez. Okay. Why it got so many? Sable said, turn in your card. All right. Tonight's Black History Month feature, Angela Davis. Oh, man. I'm going to go to the comments and then I'm going to head out. Jesus. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Anoon. Thank you for that. And thank you for the super chat, Anoon. All I'm waiting for now is for Russian troops storming Kyiv. And the Oracle says she entered the academy and became institutionalized. There you go. That's, like I said, she was considered one of the safer activists. Well, I guess I won't be talking about Angela Davis anymore for a while. Damn. Roger said, well, I guess she's going to be against reparations now. Oh, man, you guys are brutal. I got to go. I'm calling it a night. This is happening. You guys are so mean. Oh, man. I guess I won't be bringing Angela Davis on this show. Angela Davis will come on the show. She'll look at the chat and be like, I don't think they want me here. And I'd be like, oh. All right, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out, guys. I'll be back live on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.